Hey everybody, it's Emily, the Crazy Worm Lady. I am checking in on my Rubbermaid bins, and I thought I would bring you guys along for the ride. When I took off the lid today, there was a ton of castings all along the edges, and they're definitely climbing around. There was a bunch on the lid, but it wasn't so much that I was concerned about the state of the bin, but I do notice that in these Rubbermaid bins, when you have the lid on, they oftentimes will climb up the sides because the moisture condenses along the edges, and so they just go exploring a little bit. So let's peel this back and flip the bin around a little bit, take a peek and see what's going on. So there's some in the burlap. That's why I love the burlap so much. They really enjoy climbing through it. It's fun to watch. These castings are getting nice and dark. Still have a good amount of cardboard to work through, but it smells extremely earthy. It's not at all foul smelling. It kind of just smells like the dirt from your garden or something like that. It smells good. It's one thing people always ask me is, well, doesn't it smell? I've never really had a problem. Occasionally, for like a day or two after I put like a fresh batch of food in, I'll notice a little bit of an odor, especially if I put like broccoli or something like that in the mix. That'll sometimes smell a little foul. But in general, there's no smell at all, or if there is, it goes away in a day or two. Okay. Not seeing too many over here, so I'm guessing I didn't feed this area recently. I flip my bins around moving them sometimes, and I can't remember which side I fed last, but they seem to be pretty much throughout the whole bin, which is good. They're working through it. There's some nice big ones. So I've been battling a mite problem and some of these small beetles that I've talked about before that are just abundant in my Worm Factory 360, but I'm not seeing any in here right now, which is good. But my Worm Factory is just like loaded with them. I really don't know what I'm going to do about it. They're like a little bit bigger than a sesame seed, but they're just totally a nuisance in my mind. And I just get a little weirded out about the beetles, even more so than the mites. I know the mites aren't going to go anywhere. They're decomposers, and I'm sure the beetles are too. But I guess since the beetles are a little bit larger, I worry a little bit more about them escaping the bin, even though everyone on forums and stuff like that tells me it will not be a problem. But anyway, so I've been using a lot of extra bedding and trying to keep the food covered to see if their numbers will start to dwindle a little bit. And I also add a little bit of garden lime to my bins pretty regularly to try to maintain a proper pH to discourage some of the pests. So let me take you along and we'll take a peek at one of the other bins. So before I knock some of these worms off, this is what I was talking about, them kind of wandering up onto the lids and the sides. So you see tons of castings, and this is just the lid of my Rubbermaid. So I'm going to knock them off real quick into the bin, and then we will flip it around a little bit, take a peek. Okay, so here's another one of my bins. This one I actually keep my thermometer in. I think the glare, you're not going to be able to read it. But it looks like it's about 70 degrees in the bin. I just like to keep an eye on it because it is winter time. This room is heated, but I think because it's on our hardwood floors and our basement is pretty chilly, sometimes the bins get a little bit too cold for my liking. So let's take a peel back and see what's going on. Wow, trying to see. There's a lot of them. Oh, this is a coffee filter, I think. That's probably why they're all climbing around in there. Okay, so again, these castings are getting nice and dark. They're definitely working through the material. I'm not feeding this bin quite as heavily as I was, so I'm really trying to get everything broken down. I don't want to keep these bins running much longer. If you see, there's 2 worms right there that are mating. Trying to not bother them too much. See how they're connected there at the bottom? So they're mating, so I'm going to leave them alone. But you don't see that very often, so that's pretty cool. And let's take a look at this other side over here. Definitely still some worms over here. It's a little bit compacted. I wouldn't say it's too moist or anything, but it's one problem with these bins. They hold so much moisture that sometimes, especially down in these corners, it gets a little compacted. So people say not to stir up the bins too often, but I do like to do it at least once a week to try to get air down in these corners so nothing gets anaerobic or icky. Wow, I can really feel the compactness over here. But there's lots of worms. So I'm not seeing any of the beetles in this bin either, so that's really good. But I am going to take you into my worm factory for the last little check-in here, because I want to show you the sheer number of mites and these little beetles that I'm tackling. It's really been a problem, and I'd love to have anybody's feedback if you have any suggestions. So let's go take a peek at that. Okay, so this is what I'm calling my nightmare bin right now. It's my Worm Factory 360, and I'm just having so much trouble getting these mites and beetles under control. So I do have this layer up top here, which is just bedding, which does look like there's some worms crawling through it. It's damp, I guess, just from absorbing moisture from below. But let's take a peek in there, and I will show you what I'm talking about when I say I have a huge mite and beetle problem. Okay, so obviously my worms are really happy in here, which is good. I'm happy that there are so many of them up here. But if we get a little bit closer, I'm going to try to see if I can find some fresher food, which I haven't fed this in a while, so I don't know if there's any in here. Quite frankly, I'm not really seeing mites. Maybe my warning was all for nothing. But I'm really pleased with how healthy and big these worms are. Oh, here we go. See all those mites, those red mites? I've got such an overabundance of them. They drive me crazy. It's all of them right there by my thumb. That's what they look like. And there's just a lot of them. Like any surface of food that they have not, the worms have not touched, it's like they just cover it completely. Although it does look like the problem is starting to resolve itself. It's just still an annoyance factor for me. But I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. Last week was a nightmare when I opened the bin. It just looked like it was crawling with the red mites all over the top. So it's encouraging that they seem to be going down in numbers. Maybe starving this bin for a little while was a positive. So I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to double check for any beetles, and I will show you if I find any. So I didn't find any beetles, but you will notice the inside of my lid looks a little crazy. I sprinkle it with diatomaceous earth, which is a natural insect killer. So that way, if they climb up onto the lid, any of these beetles or mites, I guess it punctures their exoskeleton and it kills them. So I'm wondering if that is having an impact on the beetles, because they were just such a problem for me for quite some time. But usually when I lift off that top layer, because it sits inside this layer, usually a couple of the beetles will fall down. And again, last week when I put that top layer resting or nesting in this, when I took it off to put it back on the farm, there must have been 20 or 30 of these little, I mean, can't even describe how small they are. Like I said, it's like a sesame seed, maybe a tiny bit bigger, but they're small. But I'm not seeing any at all. So maybe we'll take a peek and check in on this bin again next week. But I'm actually pleased that it seems like the numbers of some of my pests are going down. So if you have any input, any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. Please like the video if you enjoyed this content and want some more of it. And always feel free to subscribe. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening.